Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a chilly day in New York, but a hot topic virtually. Today, we're going to explore with our two fantastic speakers the potential of AI and data analytics in improving procurement within the federal government. For the next hour, we're going to explore the use of AI and data-driven technologies in reshaping procurement practices, whether you're looking to up the game and you've done some experimentation already, or you're relatively new to the subject, somewhat afraid of wading into the AI waters, and you're looking for a confidence booster. We're here to help you share some insights and best practices. So we have a number of topic questions already prepared to share with you today, but as we go through, please post any questions or follow-up you have to the Q&A chat. We'll try to go through them as we have our back and forth today, but if you're starting a new topic, we'll get to it at the end. Also, we'll have follow-up material, so any of the materials or follow-up links that our speakers mentioned today, we'll email them out tomorrow, along with a little synopsis of our 1 hour session. So it should be a really good conversation over the next hour. My name is Michael Crosby. I'm the moderator. I run a decision intelligence company called Leadership Connect. We work with about 40,000 users inside and outside of government, helping them make decisions using data analytics around policy and procurement. And now I want to introduce our two fantastic speakers. Anna Nichols is the Senior Procurement Analyst for the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office within the DoD. And Dr. Japheth Tucker-Doswell is the President CEO of Juxtopia, also an AI futurist. So we have a really good panel. With that, it came up in our prep of just what AI means to each speaker, their definition, what it means today. I'd love for each of you to give a few minutes on yourself and your thoughts on this subject as we look to where AI and procurement can be headed over the next 18 months. Anna, we'll lead off with you.
All right, so I will give the less technical definition. I'm sure I will defer to Dr. Japheth Doswell to give the real definition of AI/ML, coming from the procurement side of the house, especially in the federal government. For us, AI slash ML machine learning, involves a lot of data, interpreting data, and then, building out capabilities to make determinations based off of said data or trends. We utilize in my office, we are trying to push the DoD and the federal government further into the bleeding edge of where industry is. So AI/ML for the federal government, we all know, is behind where AI/ML is for industry. But we are trying to kind of be the ones leaning forward, testing things out, new technologies, things that the general government user may be intimidated about because of either myths about national security concerns or untested, unproven, it hasn't been around for 50 years, et cetera. So for us, AI/ML is a broad swath of things that the DoD and the federal government can improve upon. Technologically, we firmly believe that effective AI/ML needs to be responsible and will always have a human in the loop at some point, but there is no reason that we can't automate a lot of policies, procedures, and processes in the federal government. So we're trying to do that from a procurement level and then all the way up to capabilities that we can deploy to the warfighter that will, help automate, provide better decision-making tools, and translate data in a near real-time fashion for the federal government.
Fantastic, Anna. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Doswell.
That's a great overview of artificial intelligence, especially its application for the federal government overall and specifically DoD. So thank you for that. I'll try to make it not too technical, so the audience can actually appreciate the explanation as well. So the definition of artificial intelligence, from my opinion and Juxtopia's opinion, is shared among the community of computer scientists, is the ability to mimic the cognitive and neurological processes of a human in order to make decisions more effectively and more efficiently than potentially human beings can do today through automated processes. Ranging from, as we know, machine learning and deep learning, natural language understanding, natural language processing, and then also computer vision. That these type of automated processes that the Department of Defense and other federal government agencies appreciate. So that's the broad brush in general. Artificial intelligence has been around for quite some time, I guess since Alan Turing and the Turing test, and then Marvin Minsky later on in the 1960s, so forth and so on. But now we are at the area of generative artificial intelligence, moving towards a more self-aware, self-conscious, or self-aware artificial intelligent computational algorithm that understands itself and its processes while trying to make decisions, and then building upon itself and building upon its own algorithms to improve itself overall. In Juxtopia, we delve into many aspects of artificial intelligence, from speech recognition, speech synthesis, natural language processing, computer vision, hand activity recognition to recognize a soldier in a tactical operation, or tactical combat casualty care for 68 Whiskeys, or military medical personnel trying to perform clinical procedures, doing that needle decompression or cricothyrotomy in the battlefield, and during training at Fort Sam Houston before going to theater. So how does artificial intelligence interweave into those different areas? Not to automate the human process in this context that I just described, but to augment the intelligence of the warfighter, or provide a cognitive prosthetic, if you will, for that warfighter, so the warfighter can be more tactical and increase lethality.
Excellent, thanks, Dr. Doswell. I like how both of you, mentioned a human-centered approach there. Dr. Doswell, you mentioned, kind of invoked Turing and Minsky, and so this is an interesting question when we think about, whether you're better off being proactive or procrastinating as it relates to leveraging AI in a procurement process. So even though the topic's been around a long time, certainly the media has mostly caught up relatively recently. And for those of us who've been excited about emerging technologies, only to have them embarrassingly not work when we're doing a demo of them, the question, let's start with you, Dr. Doswell, is like, are you better off waiting for other people to figure this out? I know we just had our board meeting this morning, and our board members who are perhaps post in the retirement years are asking about AI. So I would imagine within federal agency offices and in other organizations, people are asking, like, what are you doing with AI? So can you address that question first, and then we'll go to Anna?
Sure, I definitely can address that the question. The question is, that's a great one. Should we be in front of it, or should we wait for someone else or some solution to manifest? For the federal government procurement officers throughout the entire process, I think it's best to explore it, to be in front of it. Almost as Anna, I'm gonna pick on DoD a little bit, which is, I love DoD, by the way, but the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. The Defense Advanced Research Project Agency was formed, correct me if I'm wrong, to be almost like the precognitive look ahead for the Department of Defense. to understand what our adversaries would be doing before they do it. I think using that kind of metaphor, my recommendation is that we all should be in front of it. It's not going anywhere, to accept it, and then to see how this tool, because it is a tool, can be used to benefit and to improve the process more efficiently and effectively. So that's in general. I could give you some examples a little later on, if that answers the question, Michael.
That's great, Dr. Doswell. And I guess I'm preaching to the converted, given your role at CDAO. But what's your perspective?
I agree. So it is a little bit of preaching to the choir here, but CDAO was created because there was an acknowledgement that a lot of the AIML, the data, et cetera, and the DoD was kind of getting, this is a very professional phrase, lost in the sauce. So there wasn't enough intention to look at holistically what would benefit the DoD and how we can stay abreast of where our adversaries are. I've heard several times in my time at CDAO that the only thing that we share with the adversary is time. And so it's a race. We're in a constant race with our opposition to make sure that we're staying on the cutting edge so that we can defend ourselves, our allies, our ideologies. And in that sense, we need to be flexible and willing to lean forward and try things out. So there are a lot of solutions for the government's sake. We're working to and we're trying out a lot of very bleeding edge, but a lot of the federal government too. There's already a lot of proven solutions out there that would still be a leap forward for us on an enterprise-wide level. So we're examining most recently LLMs have really become, large language models have become a hot topic in the last year with the what was it, about a year ago, Chat GPT became public. And so we're tasked by the Secretary of Defense to look at all the instances where LLMs are currently in the DoD as well as where they could be, and then come up with some guidance on them. But in that vein, I agree with Dr. Doswell in the sense that we need to at least be intentional, to lean forward, be open to new technology. Its application for us would likely need to be somewhat modified from how it is in industry. And so just because a solution may not work the way it was originally intended in industry doesn't mean it couldn't work necessarily for the DoD. So we just have to have requirements owners, programs office, and leadership that are willing to try. And just because we're trying something out doesn't mean it's going to get fielded and accepted by everyone immediately. But if we start earlier in educating ourselves and socializing it, then the adoption process, when it's successful, can be faster.
Great insight. I certainly would triple that vote by saying it's better to start the experimentation process earlier because it's just less costly. You're going to make mistakes along the way, so doing that at a experimental level is a lot easier, cheaper, less embarrassing than if you wait. That's one of the follow-up questions. Is innovation also feels like expensive and costly? Just a quick follow-up, starting with you, Anna. Is that the case for AI? Is experimentation and innovation with AI another example of expensive emerging technology?
I am going to give you a classic attorney response. It depends. I think that it doesn't have to be. I think where we're finding a lot of the expense on the DoD side is, creating environments and opportunities to, get relevant data, get relevant situations, to truly test the technology that's out there and the artificial intelligence that's out there, to see how it would work in a DoD-like environment. I think that is an initial upfront cost for the DoD, and we have to improve our data quality and have a better handle on what we've got, and have buy-in. You need to take the time to get buy-in from various stakeholders. But I think that the roads that we've been able to make in the last, I'm Legacy Jake, which is one of the organizations that makes up CDAO. The buy-in that we've and roads we've been able to go down in the last couple of years have really made a lot of positive change, and so we'll be able to adopt and try out and experiment and be innovative much quicker and much cheaper the longer we're doing this.
Great answer, Dr. Doswell.
Yes. So with just elaborate on what was discussed, testing and during the experimentation right now is going to be costly. I mean, there are different programs within the federal government. I know this is probably another topic we'll discuss, down the road. It's the SBIR and STTR process, was so a great program to really discover and experiment, make mistakes, commercialize, as well as the broad agency announcements and DARPA seedlings and other type of vehicles to really understand what we have right now and what could be in the future. But even though it seems like it's emerging technology, the good thing about science is that we building from I guess, a law standpoint, precedents. So we build upon the achievements of others, the mathematical models, the Markov models, the decision trees, random forest, long short-term memory neural networks. These are based on mathematical models that have been around for quite some time. The neural nets. I used to be the youngest senior software engineer at Lockheed Martin, working in Crystal City, close to the Pentagon, and that I remember talking to this. I guess it was equivalent to skunkworks stuff. I'm not talking proprietary things right now, but we're talking about neural networks back then. That was quite some time ago. So our experimentation of artificial intelligence is not going to have too many faults if those who are really experimenting understand the science and are trained as computer scientists, real computer scientists, to make it happen with reduced risk. The good thing about software engineering, artificial intelligence is a subspecialty of computer science, that the processes are there so that mistakes can be mitigated. And the applications of artificial intelligence, there's so much empirical research one can draw on from the Institute for Electronics and Electrical Engineers, for example, to mitigate so many errors, unless it's completely novel. So I think we're in this phase where we're kind of cushioned based on precedents, based on historical research from across 50 plus years. But the emerging technologies, those that are very novel and obvious aspects of artificial intelligence, I think could be costly. But the good thing is that our procurement process in the United States covers us in a very insulated way. So those mistakes can be mitigated with different vehicles that are in place. So you can hear my explanations. I'm very optimistic about these processes and about artificial intelligence. So that's my stance there.
All right, thanks, Dr. Doswell.
If I could just add a
Sorry,
couple
Anna.
of things, I think Dr. Doswell brings up a good point. One of the tenets of CDAO is training. So Congress has even recognized this, that part of the cost of improving our technology is training. Our warfighters, our leadership, all levels need to be trained so that you can be educated not only in using it, but as procurement, you know what questions to ask for what technology, et cetera. So there are quite a few initiatives out that we're leading for the DoD for training, as well as digital talent management. So getting expertise into various offices so that it's embedded to help the DoD at large have access to somebody who can, help explain, guide, know what's going on, et cetera. So I do think that that's a definite cost of AI that's coming up that is necessary for it to be successful in the federal government. So I appreciate that. And then I also appreciate the reference to, we're getting a lot of political mechanisms in order to, like CSOs, commercial solutions openings, other transaction agreements, their cyber sitters, PIAs. There's a lot of mechanisms in place that have either, become available in the last few years or have been around and are just underutilized that are perfect for burgeoning technologies, bleeding edge, trying things out for it to be the next step to make sure that we're staying on par with, what industry is capable of. Over.
Awesome, thanks, Anna. Like, I know our own experience, AI, can be somewhat deceptive in that you can do a lot of experimentation for next to nothing. I think when you start working with large data sets, it can get expensive very quickly. So you have to be aware of that. But ultimately, probably the biggest investment, and Dr. Doswell, you mentioned, is just it's an investment of your time coming up to speed on the topic and all the nuances of the topic. So that's again something you don't want to be forced learning into a weekend. Experimentation over a longer period of time is probably going to be the cheapest way to address this topic, at least from the experience I've had. So looking at, so we have a couple high level topics. Now kind of getting it down to brass tacks with using AI perhaps for submission analysis. There's companies popping up there that are saying that they can do RFP responses into federal agencies using nothing but AI. And is the day of going into Siri and asking Siri who has the best RFP response. Are we, that far away from that? Anna, maybe start with you, and what are your thoughts on using AI and data and analytics for RFP submission analysis?
So I would be, I'm coming from the government side, but I would be hesitant as industry to have it do, not to have a person in the process, I guess, because there's a lot of nuances, especially with FAR-based contracting. If you're responding to that, if you miss an instruction or something is misinterpreted, your submission can be thrown out. I think where it would be interesting to see is CDAO itself, our procurement office, focuses on other transaction agreements, which is our, we're not subject to the FAR, we're not subject to the Competition and Contracting Act. There's a lot more leeway to try things out like that. So I think that it could definitely be beneficial to industry, but I would just, as Dr. Martell, our leader, always says, I would preface with saying you can't take a person out of the loop if you were going to make a submission. I will say on the federal side, we've utilized a large language model and built out a bot that does requirements development. So that aids our procurement and so our COs, AOs, KOs. It helps them meet with our requirements owners that often, don't have a lot of experience with contracting. And we found in an average of about 30 minutes, we can flesh out from nothing on paper to, requirements that are ready to post for another transaction agreement. So we call those challenges just to stay out of the FAR-based words. And we're hoping to expand that capability further out, but it is something that I think can really help level the playing field and utilize an LLM to get best practices in the loop. And it's been very beneficial for us. I will say, again, I have to close out with saying there's always a human in the loop. So we're still getting approval from our requirements owner with the requirements that are generated by AI before we post them. But it has been it's been a huge help in taking a process that used to take weeks, sometimes months, and, relegating it to one short meeting. So I do think that there is space for it, but I don't know that we are there yet for a human to be out of the loop, period. Over.
Dr. Doswell?
Yes, I'll try to not be too enthusiastic, I guess, about complete autonomous and ubiquitous artificial intelligence for the procurement process. But to be practical, I definitely agree with Anna's explanation on that. So when it comes to needs analysis, I believe that mining for solutions based on identified gaps within a specific federal government agency. NASA does that well with gap analysis, especially for human exploration of long duration space missions, starting with Artemis and then to Mars and then beyond. DoD does that well. The requirements analysis used to be 2167A decades ago. Then it was the middle standard 480 based on these standard system requirement specifications that could be generated or requisition requirements for procurement. So though I think large language models, LLMs, have basis in doing that very well, the dependent variables include reduced time to create some kind of requirements. In DoD, we learned that no requirements, no money. So that's very, very important. And then there's also the vetting of those requirements. When I used to work at Lockheed, there was an internal verification and validation process. That's a separate subsystem that can take in as a process the requirements generated by an artificial intelligent LLM and then verify that those requirements are solid and then help the people that are going to be looking at it anyway to do that even faster. Eventually, maybe automating the entire process once we get comfortable. And we have precedents, we have historical references to this. First, we're flying planes with a human flying planes, right? In DoD, there are various autonomous vehicles that can pick up crew, pick up passengers, and go from point A to point B without human in the loop, except to be passengers. So I think as we get more comfortable with how artificial intelligence can improve, make efficient, reduce time, and increase quality of the various processes, I think we'll look at and depend on its autonomy over time. But here and now, the human in the loop makes sense.
Excellent. Anna, there's a quick follow-up. Does FedRAMP make things more difficult and costly or no?
So I think there's probably an argument on both sides. I will say that CDAO, because we're trying to find bleeding edge solutions, we're not working with FedRAMP products. So I don't know that I'm the best person to speak on that, but I do know that FedRAMP, like a lot of other government certifications, is kind of about who has gained to learn the system in order to be efficient at it. And I do think that the federal government at large really needs to move towards greater transparency and lower barriers to entry so that more businesses can play on a large field with the federal government instead of needing to really have been in the trenches for years in order to get through required processes and procedures.
Dr. Doswell, do you have a view on that?
I don't really have a view on that, but I do have a view on what was just said. There's definitely a need for small companies. For example, obviously, I'm a small minority company, African American company, and we're playing with I guess, quote unquote, the big boys like Microsoft from a commercial standpoint. maybe Lockheed early on with some of their UltraViz work. And then we do a lot of work in artificial enabled augmented reality system. We manufacture our own head-mounted displays for situational awareness and battlefield readiness, or astronaut readiness, or EMT and paramedic first response. And that, there's a perception, of course, with human beings when you have a review process and you have people recruiting extramurally, right, or internally looking at various proposals as a response to a solicitation, then we as human beings put our own perceptions on what's going to be quality, what's going to be risky, and what entity is really going to execute and get it done. So I think that artificial intelligence has a way of normalizing that to reduce those type of challenges or biases, and then or favoritisms or nepotism, and really normalizing the type of process so that everyone has an equal playing field, as long as the programmers themselves are also in the process, inputting the data and training the models in a way that's culturally competent, empathetic, and ethical.
To that point, we at CDAO are just now getting a bias bounty going, which is essentially looking for biases in a lot of the commercial models that the DoD is exploring on utilizing, because a model was always created by a human, and there are understandable biases in our culture as a country and as individuals. And as the federal government, we have to be above that. We need to not stand for that. So I agree that that is another not necessarily acknowledged cost with moving forward in AI. Is part of our responsible AI initiative is ensuring that we are eliminating as many biases in the models that we ourselves are building or that we're funding. Over.
Awesome. I love that. But bias bounty. Sign me
Love
up.
that. Bias bounty. Yeah.
All right, so let's fast forward 6 months, and you've motivated many of the participants on this call to get started, and they're now working with someone in the vendor community, whether through an OTA or SBIR. They're really happy with it, and then fast forward another 18 months, and maybe that solution gets a little out of date. Obviously, contracting officers and procurement offices are not swimming in resources, so it takes time doing all this and finding a good solution. Like, how can you avoid that vendor interlock and continue to innovate? Maybe start with you, Anna, on this question.
Yeah, I think that one thing we've noticed, CDAO this year is putting a focus on developing out enterprise standards. It's essentially the SMEs we have in CDAO, which a good portion of CDAO's government population actually comes straight from industry, but it's SMEs that we have in the government that identified issues that the federal government just keeps tripping over in regards to technology, and so we're currently leading efforts to meet with industry and academia to make sure that we've correctly identified the problems, and then come up with solutions to them in the form of, hopefully the end product will be contract language that we can put out as best practices. But I think that if it takes, I'll preface by saying, if it takes you 18 months after you found a vendor that you want to work with under in doing AI or a new technology to get to an award, you've picked the wrong path. So it really, your contracting should move at the speed of what the solution that you're trying to get, which I fully acknowledge that federal contracting is underemployed. We have about 5 govies on my staff, so we're vastly unemployed, which is why we are developing out solutions to help us move faster. But you should really be working with your leadership to identify redundancies in your processes, identify acquisition paths that are quicker. We've done OTs in as little as 13 days in order to ensure that you're testing something in real time when it could be valuable to the DoD. And then overall, this is part of our enterprise standards, but also what we're trying to take to a contractual level is work toward vendor agnostic solutions. So, the government doesn't need to own all of the data. We don't need unlimited rights to somebody's solution most of the time. Um, we we need to focus on what is beneficial for the federal government and gear towards interoperability and whenever possible, vendor agnostic solutions so that it's something that can continue to be built on and improved, and therefore its shelf life is, it's greatly improved over.
Excellent, thanks, Anna. Great insight there. Dr. Doswell.
Yes, just to elaborate on that stated, especially with the interoperability and building systems. According to software engineering definitions, I was trained very, very well at Howard University in my master's program. And I remember these terms of interoperability, scalability, extensibility, reuse, and robustness in terms of software engineering platforms. I guess the train off the top of my head, you got to you retain these things when you're actually building them, and being responsible for building and leading systems, and leading software engineering teams, and then submitting proposals and waiting 6 months for responses. I think 6 months from now, to answer your question, Michael, as we go back to our drawing boards and think about the next steps of how artificial intelligence is going to help with these type of areas. There are tools out there that can make this process more efficiently. For example, from a business standpoint, submitting the proposal, waiting for a human review team to review it. For example, in NIH, there's a two-step process for SIVers, the sitters. There's your independent review, and then there's a panel review if you get a score. And that process takes time, and there's a lot of paper to read. The process with our 86 billion neurons, each of us trying to process that data and then recall it if we're focused and strictly paying attention to each of those applications. Frankly, I'm sure across all the reviewers, someone may not be paying attention, maybe watching TV, eating pizza, or what have you, while looking at proposals. And this is the reality. Now, an artificial intelligence algorithm using some kind of linguistic model to understand what the prose is, look at the context of what the diagrams, understanding the diagrams and matching it against what is considered novel or innovative, then matching against the other type of, let's say, NIH reporter to see if it already exists, it's already been funded, and then look at it if it's a sitter, its commercial market feasibility or the technical feasibility, looking at the biographical sketches and references of the people and the cited references that are in the bibliography and the letters of intent and so forth and so on, in maybe 3 seconds, then that's the 3 seconds that would take somebody, a human team, 6 months to actually get done. Now, in 6 months, can this happen? Probably not in 6 months unless someone's already done it and probably has an SBIR to experiment with it already. That would probably be from National Science Foundation because they're industry agnostic. And then, talk to you, Anne, about OTAs after that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's feasible, it's possible. And is it going to happen from a futuristic standpoint? Most likely it would if a computer science team is thinking about it to get it done. And would it be useful for the government? I'm sure. As long as those things that we talked about, interoperability, robustness, scalability, extensibility, reusability, is trained as well in the model to look at, so that as systems build upon itself for a specific target system for a specific federal government agency, then that those features get implemented, tested, evaluated, and then maintained in that design and the design of that is automated within an artificial intelligence algorithm, sure, I think it definitely has some promise, and we can actually get there. But again, this is my optimistic hat, not my AI adversarial hat. So, um, yeah.
Right. My 2 cents is, this is not like Excel where you can master it in some set period of time. I think everyone on this call should have, if you have 86 billion neurons, devote a few million of them every week to, continuing to learn about AI and what, your colleagues in other offices are doing, either with it, with awards or, SBIR activity, the vendor community, commit to reading about it for 30 minutes, an hour a week, and you start chipping away, kind of learning what best practices are and who's doing what. And it's an exciting topic. That's why we're all on the call today. But let's, we've covered a lot of ground so far. And in our prep, you gave a number of resources and areas where people can go for help within, inside and outside of the federal government. Can you speak to a little bit of this? And then we're definitely going to follow up with an email with some of the links that get mentioned today on this call.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of procurement and acquisitions within CDAO is not only to support our customers in a traditional sense of executing the budget and getting the solutions that our requirements owners need, but also we're trying to develop solutions ourselves. And so what we've developed thus far is the CDAO acquisition ecosystem. The corner of that ecosystem is tradewindsai.com, which again, happy to follow up with all the attendees via an email blast with more about that. But we've got on that site a lot of the podcasts that we've been doing, where we're meeting with industry and talking about things that could be improved, what's going on, different areas of concern for procurement acquisitions, and then also just AI, educating yourselves on AI, AML data topics. And then we also have the TradeWinds portal, which you access through the tradewindsai.com site. And on that portal, we have ACBot, which is the requirements LLM bot that we've developed out. We have the Solutions Marketplace, which is a new vehicle that we're piloting, hasn't been done before, that we're tracking. It's been about a year. The Solutions Marketplace has 5-minute videos of various solutions based on CDAO's mission set. And so we expand the categories that people can submit under as our mission evolves. But the videos are readily awardable in the sense that they have already met FAR, DFARS, and OT competition requirements. So we're trying to create solutions for the procurement, federal government procurement, and it's fully decentralized, so anybody can access it and make awards off of it. But we're trying to create solutions that help federal procurement move faster, move at the speed of the technology that we have, as well as on our end, cut back the red tape that we've encountered. It's a very good core group of people that want to make the improvements that need to be made for federal procurement. And so addressing a lot of the issues that we've seen, and we're continuing to develop out capabilities. So one is we do a lot of software and technology OTs. And so we have a EULA shredder that we've coordinated with DoD's IP cadre. So you can put it through, and like Dr. Doswell was saying, it's kind of an AI capability to just point out red flags right now that you should probably pay attention to, that the government would it would be issues for the federal government to comply with. We're developing out solutioning for a different way to view and quickly complete evaluations. So we're just constantly evolving, just like the technology that's out there, the problem set. But I would strongly encourage everybody to go to tradewindsai.com and register for our portal. It takes about 30 seconds. And government, academia, and industry are on the portal. And so, we love to continue to interact with everybody, find out what everybody's issues are, and that's on all levels, industry, academia, and the federal government, and, what can be done better. Then we can invest resources in solving those problems. Over.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. That's a lot of help for everyone on this call. Dr. Doswell, what are your thoughts?
I think Anna covered it. That's like the panacea. So I don't even have anything to elaborate on that.
So, Anna, you were addressing it from, let's say, contracting officer or procurement person's, point of view. There's a great question around Army legal teams and compliance teams with information. And I know within, my own organization, and I would say more the private sector, tech community, there's a lot of conversations around intellectual property rights. Where does the data go, especially in a large language model? You had Zoom come out and change their terms and conditions, which was giving them the rights to the video feed and transcripts to use in AI. You see that with other big tech vendors. Like, what are your thoughts on not just arming the procurement community with information that they can use, but also their legal teams and perhaps even their leadership?
Yeah, I think that one of the other tenets that we're trying to address this year is strategic communications, and that is helping the action officer level educate their leadership on why you don't need to be scared about XYZ, whether it be utilizing a certain type of regulation to do procurement, or whether it be the technology that you're trying to buy and test out. So there's a lot of education, admittedly, that needs to be done, and socialization of norms, which is also why we're trying to be the ones that skin our knees. We're not afraid to fail at something, so that others can point to us for use cases. Look, they did this successfully, or they learned from X, Y, and Z, and now they have developed a process or procedure, or whatever that's better, and addresses all your concerns. So it's tough. I'd say that the socialization of the options and making the new less fearful has to come from all levels. I would encourage anybody that is in procurement to actively engage with your leadership, with your legal, to find out what their concerns are, and then educate yourself so that you can help address them on the front end, so that you're not waiting to make an award when you find a stumbling block. As far as like technologies go with large language models, I think there are there are so many aspects of LLMs that could be covered on this call, but I will say we're using a version. I think it's Chat GPT-3 for our ACBot, so our requirements development AI software, that reached IL5 last year, so in the DoD incident level 5, and we're going for IL6 this year. So it is possible to get cordon off use cases for new technology and reach security levels that may be required for your organization. It's just a matter of, you need to not be scared to be the tip of the spear on that one, and be the one that is going to move forward in your organization and work out all the kinks to get it done.
Thank you, Anna. Dr. Doswell?
Yes. So to elaborate, I know in the federal government, there's an emphasis in data management plans and saving data in a very responsible way, and in a secure data repository. And then there's always the notion of intellectual property, especially from a SIBR and SITR standpoint, that procurement vehicle. And then on certain broad agency announcement, awarded contracts, what is considered proprietary to the company and what is considered open source. Now, in the context of artificial intelligence and the procurement process and intellectual property, be it copyright for software mostly, and patent if it's a utility patent for process, I think the procurement process then contract officers could work even closer with the USPTO with a shared interface for interoperability to determine what is considered real, novel, and unobvious artifacts that would be in the repository of USPTO. When I was at Lockheed Martin, we built those systems from legacy to current as you have today. And then from the company standpoint, then what does that look like in terms of, what a review committee is really looking at what's novel? Too many times I've been on review committees, and I won't talk about the agencies, but when you're it's like this panel, when we're in the review process, then individuals want to know that they know, but oftentimes refrain from things they don't. And this happens in the review process as well. So I'll see a proposal that may have a discussion on artificial intelligence, but if no one is in the room to really check the algorithms or to determine whether or not this is legit, then sometimes these proposals get passed because somebody may not want to announce to a broad audience that they don't have the necessary knowledge to really vet the proposal in the first place. So that's something that's a process within the procurement process that I believe would be beneficial to have that second pair of eyes or second pair of algorithmic type of artificial intelligence expertise, like a SME. And the intellectual property, just to revisit that, there is, I think, a need, especially like what Anna was talking about, to really being on the cutting edge to see what's out there, especially if we have adversarial countries that don't have the same IP law enforcement practices that we do in the United States. So we have to safeguard a lot, make sure that even if after 25 years a patent may expire, once it gets published, it doesn't mean that it's protected everywhere around the country. So that's something that contract officers really can be very smart at, and to start educating maybe awardees about what's going to be the commercialization type of process down the road. And so in terms of data and repository and making sure that the data management plan is set, NIST follows these standards on cybersecurity. So many vendors know how to do that, some vendors don't. So what kind of language can be then communicated? Can there be a podcast with a fully anthropomorphic embodied conversational agent that is generative in nature and artificial intelligence based on the needs of the vendor community that automatically creates itself without this, self-awareness artificial intelligence, but just purely baby step where we are right now in generative AI to really start to educate based on andragogy and pedagogy, and it's following those principles to educate the audience, the vendors, about how to store their data, how to protect the intellectual property, so forth and so on. Over and out.
Thanks, Dr. Doswell. My perspective is, any LLM or a lot of AI, it needs data to work, and many of the leading vendors don't particularly want to pay for that data, license that data. They want to consume as much of it as possible for free and hold on to it. And I certainly can understand that perspective, but if you're the owner of the data, I think you have to be aware of licensing and who owns what and what is going to get done inside and outside of that model. And those are questions that need to be asked and fully understood. Kind of from that, maybe a little bit of a Debbie Downer on intellectual property. We're going to shift to also not being your own enemy when it comes to implementing AI. And Anna, you had great points in prep of sometimes a team is their own worst enemy in kind of picturing restrictive practices that might not really exist. They're very conservative. Can you speak to that topic of not being your own enemy when it comes to using AI from a procurement point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that uh, it does. I think there's probably about 10 or 20% of the government, and I really hope I'm underestimating, that are excited and want to lean forward and do all of this new stuff. And so I think that um, in order to make fast change in entrenched parts of the federal government, you may want to align yourself with, find those that are excited about things changing in your organization. And then, do a couple of test cases, so potentially develop out your team while you're having to educate the rest of your organization. But I think too, one thing to realize, at least for the procurement community, is there for if you're going to do OTs or service sitters, there's a lot of, even in the FAR, there's a lot of gray area, and it's not a bad thing to play in the gray. And so it's important to continue to follow the left right balance that the law has given us, but the left right balance that the law has given us and what local policy or traditionally the restrictiveness that we're used to are not one and the same. And so when you need to challenge the ideology of potentially local policy or historic practice, when it doesn't need to be, the overly restricted uh, processes, procedures, language, et cetera, so that you're able to not only procure bleeding edge technology, AI, generative AI, but explore the possibility and interact with that industry. So if you can't keep working the same way you're working and expect change. So I think that it's very important to, not be afraid, be confident enough to be the one that is going to make the difference and educate yourself and others. But then also surround yourself with those that are excited for change and try to find opportunities where you can bring in new technologies. And if there are questions about applicability of certain potential acquisition strategies, et cetera, CDAO is happy to lend whatever experience we have and meet with those in the federal government as well as those in industry on kind of how to interact with potential roadblocks that you've gotten over.
Thanks, Anna. Dr. Doswell, same question.
Yes. So not to be, one's own enemy, I guess, in the procurement process, is to, I guess, have faith of what it could be. So do thought exercises to mitigate that cognitive dissonance, and with doing things like proof by contradiction exercises. Think about what could be the worst thing that could happen with artificial intelligence, brainstorm it out in the procurement process. And then those become challenges, especially if they're identified through a multidisciplinary panel of individuals in a think tank or think tank fashion. Those type of fears can then be addressed in a safe place through thought exercises. And then there are mechanisms to explore, well, like challenge.gov was created, I believe, to actually handle some of these different challenges. So if there's a list, that's almost like part of the procurement process, doing a needs analysis, right? And then things follow from there. So the need may be, we need to understand these risks to make us feel more comfortable, us putting on the hat. If I were a procurement officer, I guess that's how I would think, and then come up with these different challenges to address those risks through the different mechanisms like citizen sitters, broad agency announcements. It may not require as much funding as an OTA, and then putting the challenges sometimes in front of the students at colleges and universities that are really pushing the limit on what's out there without the risk of not getting revenue. So looking at the R&D centers in our United States, which are really core within the university structure. So I think in combination, then we lessen our ability to become our own enemies, but then embrace the possibilities of cooperative human and artificial intelligent solutions.
Awesome. Well said, Dr. Doswell. So we have about 45 seconds left. And I'll leave it to you. So for those on the call who are almost at the experimentation stage, they're thinking about doing it, like, let's end on a very positive, note. Like, what are your words of wisdom, for those people within federal agencies to get them going right now?
It can be done. So you're on the right path, and we've proven that it can be done. And so happy, as I said, to share lessons learned. Happy to share resourcing for podcasts, things that could be great to educate your leadership or those around you. But just keep fighting the good fight, because AI is here to stay, and the closer you are to the cusp of the bleeding edge right now, the better you'll be for the federal government in the future. And for the industry that continues to work with us, much appreciated, because I know that the federal government is not necessarily the easiest customer. We have large purse strings, but it often comes at a cost to the industry. So just appreciate the continued dialogue as we can try to evolve and be more transparent and find better ways to work with each other.
Awesome. Well said. Anna Nichols, Dr. Doswell, thanks so much for your hour today. Thanks for everyone for joining. There's a few questions, so we'll try to follow that up in the email. There's a couple of questions around specific requirements and state and local government. So again, thanks everyone for participating, and have a great rest of the day.